Chapter 4 has 35 verses and it starts in the Koren Sachs Chumash at the bottom of page 664 and 665. After having spent the last 3 chapters learning about voluntary korbanot, such as the ola, the burnt offering, and the mincha, the offering made from flour, and the shlamim, the peace offering, this chapter is going to introduce an obligatory sacrifice known as the korban chatas. We would translate this as the sin offering, and it would be brought after certain sins were committed unintentionally. We learn a profound idea from the korban chatas. People make mistakes, even good people, even leaders, and even entire communities. The Torah is not interested in pretending mistakes never happen. Instead, it provides a path for acknowledging them, repairing them, and moving forward. And that's why we will see 4 separate categories of korban chatas in this chapter, depending on the mistake that was made. 3 of them apply to 3 different types of leaders. First and foremost, we will read about the korban that would be brought by Kohen Gadol, who through mistakes of his own have caused other people to sin. The second is the korban brought in a situation where, because of an erroneous ruling by the rabbis, the entire community ended up making a mistake. In the third case, we're going to read about the chatas that would be brought if a king sins and violates one of Hashem's commandments unintentionally. And then the 4th type of korban chatas would be the chatas brought by an individual who made a mistake and violated a rule in the Torah that would carry the spiritual punishment known as kares, spiritual excision or being cut off. And in each of these 4 instances, there was a type of korban chatas that would be brought. And we will see that for a korban chatas brought by a Kohen Gadol or by the elders of the Jewish community, they would bring a bull, which is the largest and more expensive animal to bring. If it was a king, then they would bring a male goat. And for an ordinary individual, they will bring a female goat or a sheep. Now, we often think of the word sin in a particularly negative way. It doesn't paint a very pretty picture. But interestingly, the Hebrew word for sin, which is chet, is connected to the word which means to miss a target. And so really, when we are committing a sin, and especially one where we've done it by accident, what we're really saying is that we have missed the target, we have missed the opportunity to do things to the best of our ability, and we've let ourselves down. And so we're not bringing this chatas, we're not bringing this animal because we think Hashem needs animals, we're bringing it because we understand that actions have consequences. And even unintentional mistakes affect the world. Now, it's worth pointing out that when someone violates a mitzvah in the Torah, b'shogeg, unintentionally, it may mean one of 2 things. It may mean that they didn't know that this was a forbidden act. And so when they did it unintentionally, they thought they were doing something that they were allowed to do. Or it might be that they knew that it wasn't allowed, but they didn't realize that they couldn't do it at that particular time or in that particular place. And so there is an element of absent-mindedness when they have done this action that moves their status down from someone who does something intentionally to someone who does something unintentionally. And so there's 2 different consequences for that. If someone had done it willingly, they could be facing the death penalty, or they could be facing kares, which is a spiritual excision. But since they have done it b'shogeg, by accident, unwillingly or unintentionally, then the Torah is only commanding them to bring a sacrifice. There are 2 mitzvot recorded in this chapter. The first is the commandment for a sacrifice to be brought if the elders, the Jewish court, the rabbis, made a ruling which was erroneous, and as a result of that, Jewish people violated something that is forbidden in the Torah on account of their instruction. And the second is a commandment for an individual who has sinned by mistake to bring a korban chatas. With that introduction in mind, let us turn to chapter 4, verse 1. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying. Verse 2. Daber el bnei Yisrael lemor. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, Nefesh ki secheta vishkaga. If a person, and as we've pointed out before, nefesh really means a soul. And so this sacrifice is really going to be making up for an action that strikes at a person's most spiritual core. So nefesh ki secheta vishkaga. If a person sins unintentionally, by accident, mikol mitzvos Adonai, from all of the commandments of Hashem, asher lo se'asena, that should not have been done, va'asa me'achas mehena, and he has committed one of them. Verse 3, im hakohen hamashiach yecheta, if it's the anointed Kohen who sins, meaning the Kohen Gadol, la'ashmas ha'am, bringing guilt upon his people, vehikriv al chataso asher chata, then he should bring, on account of the sin that he has done, par ben bakar, a young bull, tamim, unblemished, ladonai, for Hashem, to Hashem, lechatas, as a sin offering. Verse 4, Vehevi es hapar el pesach ohel moed, and he shall bring the bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting, lifnei Adonai, before Hashem, v'samach es yado al rosh hapar, and he shall lean his hands on the head of the animal, on the head of the bull, v'shachat es hapar lifnei Adonai, and he shall slaughter the bull before Hashem. Verse 5, V'lakach ha-kohen ha-mashiach midam hapar, then the anointed Kohen, the Kohen Gadol, is going to take the lifeblood of this bull, v'hevi oso el ohel moed, and he will bring it to the tent of meeting. Verse 6, V'taval ha-kohen es ba'or badam, the Kohen shall dip his finger into the blood, v'hiza min hadam sheva pa'amim lifnei Adonai, and he shall sprinkle the blood 7 times before Hashem, es penei paroches hakodesh, onto the face of the sanctuary's inner curtain that separates between the Kodesh HaKadoshim with the golden aron, the Holy of Holies, and the rest of the Mishkan. Verse 7, V'nasan ha-kohen min hadam, then the Kohen shall apply some of the blood, al karnos mizbach katores hasamim, onto the corners, onto the horns of the altar of the katores, which is the fragrant incense, lifnei Adonai, before Hashem, asher ba'ohel moed, which is in the tent of meeting, ves kol dam hapar yishboch, and the rest of the bull's blood he shall pour out, el yesod mizbach ha'olah, at the base of the altar of the burnt offerings, asher pesach ohel moed, which is at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Verse 8, ves kol chelev par hachatas yarim mimenu, he shall remove all of the fat from the bull of the sin offering, es hachelev hamachase al hakerev, the fat that covers the innards, ves kol hachelev asher al hakerev, and all the fat that is on the innards. Verse 9, Ves shtei haklayos, and the 2 kidneys, Ves achelev asher alehen, and the fats that are on them, asher al aksalim, that are on the flanks, Ves hayoseres al kaved, and the diaphragm of the liver, al klayos yesirena, he shall remove with the kidneys. Verse 10, Ka'asher yuram mishor zevach hashlamim, just as it would be removed from the peace offering bull, V'hiktiram hakohen al mizbach ha'olah, and the Kohen shall send these up in smoke upon the altar of burnt offerings. Verse 11, Ve'es or hapar, but the skin of the bull, ve'es kol b'saro, and all its flesh, al roshov al kra'av, together with its head and its legs, ve'kirbo ufirsho, and its innards and its waist, meaning its dung. Verse 12, v'hotzi es kol hapar el michutz l'machaneh, he shall take out all the rest of this bull to outside of the camp, el makom tahor, to a pure place, el shefech hadeshen, to the ash heap, v'saraf oso al eitzim ba'esh, and burn it upon a wood fire, al shefech hadeshen yisaref, at the ash heap it shall be burnt, which was a place outside the camp for all of the waste elements of a korban, and so these parts of the animal don't get burnt as part of the offering on the altar, they get burnt outside of the Mishkan premises. Verse 12, we now talk about the korban that would be brought if the entire community of Israel committed an unintentional sin. Ve'im kol hadas Yisrael, if the entire community of Israel, yishgu, shall make an error, v'ne'elam davar me'enei hakohal, and a matter became obscured from the eyes of the congregation, va'asu achas mikol mitzvahs Adonai, asher lo se'asena va'ashemu, and they commit one of the commandments of Hashem that may not be done, va'ashemu, and they become guilty. And this word yishgu, which we translate as error, or making an error, sounds like the word meshuggah, which is a word we may all be familiar with. The idea being one has to be meshuggah to make a mistake and to violate something that Hashem has prohibited. Verse 14, V'noda'ah hachatas asher chatu aleha, when the sin that they have committed becomes known, V'hikrivu hakahal par ben bakar lechatas, then the community shall bring a young bull as a sin offering, V'heviu oso lifnei ohel moed, and they shall bring it before the tent of meeting. Verse 15, V'samchu ziknei ha'edah es yedehem al rosh hapar, the elders of the community will put their hands on the head of this bull, lifnei Adonai, before Hashem, v'shachat es hapar lifnei Adonai, and they will slaughter the bull before Hashem. Verse 16, V'hevi hakohen HaMashiach, the anointed Kohen, the Kohen Gadol, shall bring midam hapar, some of the blood, el ohel moed, to the tent of meeting. Verse 17, V'tzaval hakohen etzba'o min adam, the Kohen shall dip his finger into the blood and take some of the blood, v'hizah sheva pa'amim, and will sprinkle 7 times, lifnei Adonai, before Hashem, es pnei haparoches, on the face of the curtain. Verse 18, Umin adam, and from the dam, yitain al karnos hamizbeach, he shall place on the corners, on the horns of the mizbeach, asher lifnei Adonai, which is before Hashem, asher bo'ohel moed, which is in the tent of meeting. Verse kol hadam, and the rest of the blood, yishpoch el yisod mizbach ha'olah, he shall pour out all the rest at the base of the altar, of the sacrificial altar, of the burnt offerings, asher pesach ohel moed, which is at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Verse 19, Ves kol chelbo yarim imenu, then he shall remove all its fat, v'hiktir hamizbecha, and send it up in smoke upon the altar. Verse 20, V'asal lapar, and then he shall do to the bull, kasher asal lapar hachatas, the same as he did with the bull of the sin offering, Kenya aselo, so too he should do for this one. V'chiper aleihem hakohen, and so the kohen shall provide them atonement, forgiveness, v'nislach lahem, and they shall be forgiven by Hashem. Verse 21, V'hotzi es hapar el michutz l'machaneh, the kohen shall then take the bull outside the camp, v'saraf oso, and burn it, kasher saraf es hapar harishon, just as he burns the first bull that we spoke about, chatas hakahal hu, this is the community's sin offering. Verse 22, we're going to be reading about the chatas brought by the nasi, which our rabbis explain means the king. Verse 22, Asher nasi yechata, when a ruler sins, meaning the king, va'asa achas mikol mitzvos Adonai Elohav, and does one of the mitzvot of Hashem his God, Asher lo se'asena, which should not have been done, bishgaga, and he did it unintentionally, va'ashem, and he becomes guilty. Verse 23, or hoda elav chataso asher chataba, or if the sin that he committed becomes known to him, vehevi es korbano, then he shall bring his sacrifice, seir izim, zachar tamim, he shall bring a male goat, unblemished. Verse 24, v'samach yado al rosh hasair, and he shall lay his hand upon the goat's head, v'shachat oso bimkom asher yishchat es ha'olah, and then he shall slaughter it in the place where the burnt offerings are slaughtered, lifnei Adonai, before Hashem, chatas hu, it is a sin offering. Verse 25, lakach ha-kohen midam ha-chatas be'etzba'o, and the kohen shall take some of the blood on his finger, v'nasan al karnos mizbach ha'olah, and put it onto the horns, onto the corners of the sacrificial altar, v'es damo, and the rest of the blood, yishpoch el yisod mizbach ha'olah, he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offerings, the sacrificial altar. Verse 26, Ves kol chelbo yaktir hamizbecha, he shall send up all its fat in smoke upon the altar, kechelev zevach hashlamim, like the fat of the shlamim, of the peace offerings, v'chiper alav hakohen mechataso, and the kohen shall make atonement for that leader for his sin, v'nislach lo, and he will be forgiven. And then verse 27, we talk about the sin offering of an ordinary individual. V'im nefesh achas techeta vishgaga me'am haaretz, if an individual among the people sins unintentionally, ba'asosa, by doing achas mitzvos Adonai asher lo se'asena, by doing one of the commandments of Hashem that may not be done, va'ashem, and he becomes guilty. Verse 28, or hoda elav chataso asher chata, or if a sin that he had committed becomes known to him, vehevi korbano, then he shall bring his sacrifice, seiras izim tmima, an unblemished goat, nekeva, a female goat, al chatosa asher chata, for the sin that he committed. Verse 29, v'samaches yado al rosh hachatas, he shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, v'shochates hachatas b'mkom ha'olah, and it shall be slaughtered in the same place as the burnt offerings. Verse 30, v'lokach ha-kohen midama ba'etzba'o, and the kohen shall take some of its blood with his finger, v'nosan al karnos mizbach ha'olah, and apply it to the horns, to the corners of the altar of the burnt offerings, the sacrificial altar. Ve'es kol dama, and the rest of the blood, yishpoch el yisod hamizbeach, he shall pour out at the base of the altar. Verse 31, Ve'es kol chelba yasir, and he shall remove all the fats, ka'asher yisach chelev me'al zevach hashlamim, just as the fat is removed from a peace offering, v'hiktir ha-kohen hamizbecha, and he shall send it up in smoke upon the altar, l'reach nichoach l'Adonai, as a pleasing aroma to Hashem. V'chiper alav hakohen, and the kohen shall make atonement for that person, v'nislach lo, and he will be forgiven. Verse 32, Vim keves yavi korban olachatas, if one brings a sheep as a korban chatas, nekeva smima yavienu, nekeva smima yaviena, then he shall bring an unblemished female sheep. Verse 33, V'samaches yado al rosh hachatas, so we see he can either bring a female goat or he can bring a female sheep. Verse 33, V'samaches yado al rosh hachatas, he shall lean and place his hands on the head of the sin offering, v'shochat oso lechatas b'mkom asher yishchates ha'olah, and he shall slaughter it for a sin offering in the place where one would slaughter the burnt offerings. Verse 34, V'lokach hakohen midam hachatas be'etzba'o, and the kohen shall take some of the blood on his finger of this sin offering, v'nosan al karnos mizbach ha'olah, and he shall apply it to the corners or to the horns of the sacrificial altar. Ves kol dama yishpoch el yisod hamizbeach, and the rest of the blood he shall pour at the base of the altar. And finally, verse 35, Ves kol chelba yasir, and he shall remove all of the fats, ka'asher yusar chelev hakesev, mizevech hashlamim, just as he would remove the fats of a sheep being brought for a korban shlamim. V'iktir hakohen osam hamizbecha, and the kohen shall send it up in smoke upon the altar, al ishei Adonai, with the other fire offerings to Hashem, v'chiper alav hakohen al chataso, and the kohen shall make atonement for that person, asher chata, for the sin that he committed, v'nislach lo, and he shall be forgiven. And that brings us to the end of chapter 4. In chapter 5, we will continue to read about more obligatory offerings that would be brought in specific cases where people have done something that they shouldn't have done. I look forward to learning that chapter with you. In the meantime, have a wonderful and meaningful day.